Hi, today we're going to go over how to remove the brakes on Noblelift edge units. This is a PTE33N 3300 lift-pound capacity truck and PTE45N 4500-pound lift capacity truck. Both of them have mechanically engaged, electronically released brake systems on them. What I'm going to do today is show you how to get to them, remove them off the truck without having parts go everywhere. Alright, first thing you want to do is remove the cover to access the brakes on the drive unit. This is simply done by a 6mm hex head wrench, 4 bolts, and they pop right off. Now that we got the covers off, let's take a look at the brake systems. The 4500 and the 3300 you'll see differ slightly. This one has a black plastic cover on it, this one has a white. The 45 has a white cover on it. Biggest difference between the 4500 and the 3300 is the 3300 comes off in one piece, meaning you don't have to cage it, which is put bolts in it to hold the disc together with the friction plate and the spring unit on it. So the 33 can come off in one piece, whereas the 45 needs to be caged or else the springs and the disc plate will fall off. We'll start with the 3300. Here's your PTE33N brake assembly. Simple to remove. First thing you want to do, get the plastic cover off. Take your screwdriver, just get in behind here, pry the cover loose, and it comes right off. Now you have access to your 3 Allen head bolts that hold the brake assembly on. These Allen head bolts are 3mm Allens. Simple by going in, turning, loosening them up. What you don't want to do is try to unloosen one of them all the way. The screw's not long enough to come out of the hole and clear the brake assembly before the other ones are. Meaning you take this one out about halfway, go to the next one, about halfway, third one, halfway. Now you can go through and remove them all the way out. Now with them all undone, simply wiggle the system loose, the brake system loose, and it pops right off. Inside of here, you'll see you have a disc with a hex head nut on it. That nut grabs the disc, spins inside of here. And you'll see on the back side, and why I say this is a one-piece system, is that there's 3 bolts here, countersunk flathead bolts, that hold the whole system together. This system is not repairable. If you have a disc wear out, system wears out, it only acts on a few thousandths of clearance. So once the system goes, it gets stuck, it wears out, you want to replace the system. It's not a repairable brake system for the 3300s. And that's it for that. The PTE33N could have 2 different brake systems on it. The system itself works the same. One of them you see will have 5 holes, where one of them has 3. The only thing the other 2 holes are for on the 5-hole one is that you can cage this brake and move the disc in it. In case you ever get moisture inside your brake and it locks it up and it doesn't want to move when it's released, you can take a M5 by 30mm with a pitch of 0.08. Those go into that hole, the 2 larger holes, 180 degrees from each other. Tighten them down, and that's just finger tight. Now you can see in here the disc, we can't move the disc because the springs, let me remove the cover here, the disc inside there is being compressed against the friction plate by spring pressure. Now with those 2 Allen head M5 bolts in there, we can tighten them down. It only takes less than a quarter turn to tighten it. Now that we tighten them down, you can now take that friction disc that's in there and move it. It is not recommended to try to repair these. These only work on a few thousandths of clearance for the brake system. Better off to just replace it. For putting it back together or putting a new one on, simple. Unit slides right back on there, line the holes up with the bolts, tighten them up, all three. Unit is secure. Make sure you've got your rubber boot on there. Put your plastic cover back on. This protects dirt and debris from getting into the system, into the brakes. And there you go. So for removing the brakes on the PT45N, you're going to need to cage the brake first. The brakes on the PT45N differ from the PTE33 in that the brake assembly itself is in different pieces on it. If you don't cage it, the springs will come loose and pop out when you go to take the 3 Allen head bolts off. So for caging, you're going to need 2 M4 fine pitch by 35 millimeter screws to cage the brake. Those go in the 2 open holes right here. You need to do that so that the springs don't pop out when you take it apart. All right, so we put the screws in. These happen to just be Phillip head screws. Screw right in. Again, once you get them down to the bottom and they bottom out, you don't need to go too far, less than a quarter turn, and they tighten. Now your brake is caged. Now you can safely take this brake off of here without having all the springs fall apart. Allen heads are a 4 millimeter. And unlike the PTE33, these bolts come out and come completely off. Don't take them completely off. Just loosen them up and leave them there. I'll show you why in a second. Okay, now our bolts are all loose. Screws are in holding the spring assembly, the pressure plate against the magnetic assembly. Holding the brake on there, we can pull back our dust cover a little bit. Just get it off of there so it doesn't stick to the truck. Now, you want to put your hand up against it. You're holding all 3 of the bolts in there and pull back. And here's the reason why you want to keep your hand against there. There's spacers right here. These spacers will fall out. That's why you keep the screws in there to keep the spacers on there and keep everything out of the hole. Once you get it off there, then it's easy. Just pop these off. Put them in a tray, the same with the bolts. And there you got your magnetic assembly off of the truck. Now you can access the disc and the backing plate. Here's the disc, brake disc, comes right off. And your backing plate, your wear plate. Putting your brake system back together just goes back in the opposite way that you took it apart in. You want to take your friction or wear plate, put it on first. Take your disc and put it on, remembering that your disc is timed. So it's got a larger opening in it right here where it slides on. Set that back on there. Don't worry about this being loose here. We'll adjust that in a minute. Now your brake assembly itself, put your screws in, put your spacers back on there, being careful not to drop them. Hold them against there. Then we're going to put this back up against the housing, line our holes back up. This is where you move the friction plate around a little bit. Usually get the top one centered up in there, tightened on. Start tightening it. And then just go around with your other ones. Tighten it back up. There we go. Now that we got all 3 bolts tightened back up and your brake assembly back on the axle housing, we can put our dust cover back over. And then we can remove our 2 M4 screws that are holding the spring assembly together. There you go. Now you're ready to go back into service. There you have removal and replacement of the Noblelift Edge PTE35N and 45N brake systems. Look for future tech tips and repair videos on Noblelift equipment at nobleliftna.com. Thanks.